And David, I'm going to combine 3 or 4 thoughts here. A couple of first couple were for you specifically. Of course, it's going to have to deal with marijuana. First comment is the Netherlands have had legal Mary Jane for years. Recently, they published a study showing that Mary Jane users committed more burglaries and robberies than non-users. How do you justify legalization and to avoid criminalization of users when we know the usage is not the real problem? Next thought is, how can you want to legalize marijuana? What about cocaine, heroin, etc.? They're plant-based too. Then the next thought is throughout this race there's been a lot of speculation as to your stance on legalizing marijuana. Would you please clarify what your position is? Are you for or against a legalization of marijuana? And you might include whether you might be against the medical usage regulated as a prescription. What can we expect from you this session? That's a mouthful.
Thank you. And it's a very emotional and personal issue. Almost all of our families have been touched by drugs and the abuse of them. There is a place for drugs. Governments approved many of them. And many of those even cause great harm. And if you dare to read all the harm, you may not take them, and you may seek to go and use a natural remedy. But anyway, I understand the emotion, I understand the concern, but I seek to address issues by principles. And, you know, it's easy to talk about Obamacare, and I'm not for its expansion here in Texas. I've opposed that. But I don't want Obamacare-style regulation getting in between me and my loved one. I don't believe you should incarcerate someone if they haven't harmed their neighbor. And right now, under prohibition, where it's illegal to plant or grow, possess, use marijuana or hemp, it's not stopping criminals. The illegal use is abounding. You can go to any public school. But what it is doing, it's stopping responsible families here in this district from using it to stop seizures for girls and boys, 20 to 300 a day. One family spent over $1 million of government-approved drugs, and with no effect, went to another state. And that girl went 3 weeks without any seizure. There's one right now that's fled Texas. The cannabidiol oil, which we did basically legalize, has a very low amount of THC, but it only helped 1 of the 3 seizures. The other 2 it aggravated. They had to elevate the THC, and it helped all 3. Government does not need to be in the way of patients and their doctors. It's not our role unless you harm your neighbor. And those laws are still in place and would be if marijuana was authorized to use.
I've been very adamant throughout the entire campaign that I'm absolutely opposed to legalizing marijuana. And I'm the only candidate to do that. Now, let me give you my reasons. As a funeral home owner, I see cases. Had one not long ago, young girl, 20 years old. Drove off the road, smoking a joint, broke every bone in her body. Both of my opponents up here voted for House Bill 507, which decriminalized marijuana. I still like them, but they were wrong. Because you know what? At that age, these young people do not have the ability to make the critical decisions that it would take not to do the things that are going to harm themselves and kill themselves with this. With that philosophy, and we see it all the time, I see it, we know it's a gateway drug. It's going to cause bigger problems. With the philosophy we just heard, they're going to do it anyway. It's out there. Well, if that's the case, then why are we going to secure the border? Why do we even worry about that pesky Constitution thing? Why do we worry about abortion? Because people are going to continue to do it. You know, the idea is we have to do what's right. We have a duty. God entrusted us with these children. We have a duty to make the tough decision to say no. Now, medical-wise, look, I don't know how smoking marijuana, when everything about smoking is bad for you, we can take the active ingredient in it, turn it into a pharmaceutical company, let them make a drug that we can get to these people. There's another way other than giving them a joint that they can smoke. There's another way. I don't believe that we should put our children in danger. They're going to be behind the bleachers, that's right. Instead of smoking cigarettes, they're going to be smoking marijuana. I believe we have a duty to protect them. We have to protect them. Thank you.
So to answer the group of questions, we've seen what's happening around the country. We've seen people kind of joke about marijuana in the media and in popular culture. But it's good for us to remember, and I know you've had the same experience I have, talking to law enforcement officers and talking to prosecutors. Everyone will tell us, everyone I've ever asked this question has said marijuana is a gateway drug. There's really no debate about that as far as I can tell. We also know that marijuana does damage to the brain and to the lungs. And in adolescence, we know now that damage to the brain and the lungs is serious and permanent. And how many of us know that many of these illegal drugs, like marijuana, are aimed at those children, those adolescents? So there's no place for that. There's no place for legalization. We've seen what's happening in Colorado and other states. Texas does not need that. No way. Now, there was a limited medical marijuana bill, Senator Eltis' bill that takes the oil. I don't want to get into all those details with you, but it was a limited bill. The House and Senate passed. The governor signed it. We'll see how that works. That's medical marijuana, very limited, very narrow to address those issues. But as you guys well know, this was discussed a lot around here and in the media. The proposal to completely legalize marijuana, treat it like any other plant, I cannot support that. I've never supported that. I never will support that. I've had law enforcement officers tell me, if we want to look at fixing the system, let's deal with these first-time offenders who are with a small amount of marijuana. Let's fine them. We're not going to legalize that, but let's fine them. Let's hold them accountable. We don't necessarily have to lock them up. That's what prosecutors and law enforcement tell me. But if we're talking about legalization, let me answer the question very clearly. I am opposed to legalization of marijuana. I always have been. I always will be.
Now, Brian, I heard you say that, except where you voted for House Bill 507. It took it from a $2,000 fine and 6 months in jail to a $250 fine, and that's it. Now, when we're talking about cleaning out the jails, that's one thing. But when you do that, you've told these young people that it's okay. Don't worry about it. Nothing's going to happen to you. If you don't want them in jail, then fine. Say no jail time and increase the penalty as far as the fine. Make them do service, something. But when you go and take away all of that and you say a $250 fine and that's it, young people hear, woohoo, it's okay. And I think that's wrong.
There's a question of how it's a gateway. It certainly is. So is tobacco and alcohol. But the American Medical Association says that only 10% are addicted. Otherwise, we'd have all those veterans who are in Vietnam still on marijuana. And it's a gateway, probably. I think decriminalization is a step in the right direction. But it's still buying it from a criminal who wants to introduce it to others. Now I'd invite my two colleagues here to think about gun control. I'm glad they're inconsistent. If they applied those principles to gun control, we wouldn't allow people to have guns because they might kill themselves. And they have. It's one of the major means of committing suicide. But it also can be used responsibly. And also we're spending a whole lot of money incarcerating people who haven't harmed their neighbor. Let's give them help. Let's not put them in a cage.
Thank you.
Since my friend went out of order and called me out and misconstrued something.
Let's keep going.
Thanks very much. Briefly.
This is the last one, though.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Hey, this is the first one I've asked for. And I didn't get it without asking, by the way. But thanks for letting me up
We
here.
would have given
Briefly.
it to him anyway.
Briefly on this. This is an emotional issue. I think we all realize that. Again, prosecutor filed a bill, and law enforcement swore that they told us if someone has a small amount, let's deal with that. But the question here is about legalization of marijuana, treating marijuana like any other plant. And maybe people's motives for that are medical, but clearly that bill opens the door. That bill we're discussing it did a whole lot more than just medical. I think everybody realizes that. And so let me just ask you this. If, on this issue, look at who is supporting who. The East Texas Police Chiefs Association, right here in our part of the world, had never before endorsed in a race. They endorsed me in this race. So did the DPS officers, so did CLEAT, so did the Texas Municipal Police Association. Every major law enforcement group in the state has endorsed me on this issue because I'm against legalization of marijuana. Thank you.
Mr. Lee.